Chapter 16, Part 2 of 40,000 Miles Over Land and Water. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christoph Stangenberg. 40,000 Miles Over Land and Water by Ethel Gwendoline Vincent. The Shrines of the Hindu Faith. The Mohammedans form an important unit in the population of India. Of the 200 million of people under British rule, they number 45 millions. The Mussulman may be distinguished from the Hindu by two features in his dress. His coat is fastened on the left side, in contradistinction to the right side of the Hindu. His turban is formed of yards of stuff loosely wound round his head, while that of the Hindu is generally tightly wreathed or plaited. The city of Benares is a holy of the holiest to the Hindu. 500,000 gods are said to be worshipped in the shrines and niches lying in and round about the city for some miles. 1,000 temples are within her walls. The streets are full of the aged and dying, brought here to expire, for they think Benares is the gate of heaven. Hundreds of thousands of pilgrims come annually to bathe in the waters. Those afflicted with the terrible deformity of elephantiasis take refuge here, and lepers lie about in the streets, exciting the compassion and alms of pilgrims. Leprosy is seen in both its forms, that one, the most painful and agonizing, too revolting for description, and the other, when the skin literally becomes white as snow, presenting a very awful appearance when seen in partial effect on the dark skin of the natives. After tiffin we resumed our sightseeing, beginning again with that long dusty drive to the city of which we were wearying already, threading our way through a lane of the native quarter, pursued by the hungry crowd of beggars and guides, all greedy for endless baksheesh. We entered a small square. Here, under a red temple in the centre, was a well, into which women were casting flowers. It was the childbearing well, where childless women come with floral offerings to propitiate the goddess. Just in front stood a huge stone bull, the sacred bull of the Hindu worship. In every part of the city you see tame bulls roaming about at will, who are yet never killed by the Hindu. They live in the temples and mosques and share with the flocks of goats, kept for sacrificial purposes, the refuse of the city. The filth, the dirt, the smells of these temples are indescribable. After passing through one which had a curious cupola and a minaret at each corner, with fine open-work carving, we mounted some steps and stood opposite the Golden Temple. The spire of the central dome and the 4 smaller domes flanking each corner are covered with pure plates of gold. This is in accordance with the bequest of one Ranjit Singh. The temple is dedicated to Shiva, the presiding deity of Benares, and in each division we find a Mahadeo, or monolith, a plain conical stone set upright. The Mahadeo is the symbol of the Linga, or creative principle, and is found in every temple or shrine, in every niche set up by the roadside, throughout India. It becomes a familiar object of the Hindu worship. After this we had a long drive to the Durga Kund, the celebrated monkey temple. The antiquity of everything in India strikes us very much. The women in their muslin draperies drawing water at the wells bring to mind some biblical picture. Their earthenware jars and pitchers resemble the old Egyptian vessels, while the rude ox carts with their clumsy wooden wheels are like the Roman chariots. As we drive along, we are delighted with quaint carvings over gateways, wayside temples, and rude drawings on the wall, representing hydra-headed monsters or blue and scarlet elephants, meeting with their trunks in deadly combat. We are first aware of being in the neighborhood of the temple by the monkeys, who are perching on the housetops and swinging in the trees. Fed regularly by the attendants, numbers swarm in and about the temple, fat, portly fellows of a rich orange color, all living deities to the Hindu. The Durga Kund is built in a graceful pyramidal form, quaintly carved with all the animals of the Hindu mythology. It is painted a dark red color, and the porch at the entrance is brought into relief by silver lines. Here hangs a large bronze bell, the gift, it is said, of a European magistrate. The silver goddess is seated inside a shrine, and before the revengeful Durga stands a bowl of blood, mingling with some floral offerings. The fat Brahmins in charge collected a crowd of monkeys in the court by scattering some grain. From all parts they sprung up, mothers with their babies clinging round their bodies, and patriarchal monkeys gibbering and swinging down from the airy pinnacles of the temple. Outside we noticed the wooden block and hatchet, smeared with blood, where the kids are killed for sacrifice, and the monkey tree, a hollow tree, where all the baby monkeys are born. There was no time to visit any more of the 1,000 temples of Benares, many of which are dedicated to strange uses, such as that of the goddess of hunger, where a large number of beggars are daily fed, that of Dandpan, the policeman of Benares, whose priest chastises the offender against law and order with a birch of peacock's feathers, or the Manikarnika, a well of putrid water held very sacred and supposed to have been filled in the first instance by the perspiration of Vishnu, nor the well of Jali, where the future is seen reflected in the water at noon, the only hour when the sun's rays reach its surface. Then we visited a bazaar or chowk. It is a picturesque little world, very busy about its own business and confined in a thoroughfare only a few feet wide. Above, the gables of the houses nearly meet, and the overhanging balconies with wooden carvings obscure the light. Cross-legged on the step over the street sat hundreds of active workers, with their varied merchandise spread out before them, open to the street. Of course, we were in search of the Benares brasswork, and with great interest we watched the simple method by which the elaborate patterns are traced. An ordinary nail, run deftly up and down and gently hammered on the brass vase or bowl, forms the fretted ground, while the pattern is picked out carefully afterwards. Quite young boys were employed on this and on the kinkob work, the gold and filigree embroidery on cloth for which Benares is also famous. Up 2 pair back and in dark workshops we found and chose what we wanted. Whilst the inevitable waiting for the packing up ensued, we were summoned to the balcony by the sound of the tom-tom and the shrill and plaintive note of the bagpipe flute. Down the narrow medieval street, carrying us back to the 12th century, came a gay procession, preceded by a merry crowd pushing a way for itself. It was a wedding party returning after the ceremony. The boy bridegroom mounted on a white horse was being led in the centre. The girl bride followed in the same way. And then there came the relations and friends carrying the presents and offerings in kind and produce. Returning home through the bird market, we saw a disgusting act of cruelty. 4 crows were lying on their backs on the ground, their feet and wings tied together, while a fiendish old man with white hair kept watch over them. For 2 or 3 days he would have kept them like this, without food or water, trembling with fright on the chance of some pious Hindu passing by and paying a few peas for their release. We indignantly gave him an anna, and had the real happiness of seeing them all released and fly away, though one we feared still had his feet tied together, as he only just reached and dropped onto the wall in safety. The natives are hideously cruel to animals. They twist the tail of a bullock round and round till you hear the muscles and sinews cracking. It is rare to see a cart drawn by a bullock without some running sore where yoke chafes and donkeys and horses are so tightly hobbled that they cannot move or lie down. A gentleman truly remarked to us, there are 3 stages through which Englishmen pass when travelling or living in India. First, there is extreme sympathy with the native, and surprise at the rough treatment of the Anglo-Indian. This is followed by intense disgust at their cruelty, laziness, and ingratitude, and lastly he passes into an indifferent state, accepting the native as he is. The second stage, I think, we reach today, after having certainly gone through the first on landing. The Grand Duke and Duchess of Mecklenburg-Schwerin, with Don Carlos, the unsuccessful candidate for the Spanish throne, are staying in the hotel. When we arrived home this evening, we found the balcony covered with baskets of fruits and vegetables, bouquets of flowers with baked sweetmeats, brought to them as offerings of respect by the natives. The laughing of jackals around the house and the trumpeting of a neighbouring elephant made night hideous for us. Tuesday, January 20th. We had again to be up very early and drive down to the Ghat, where the secretary of the Maharaja of Benares, the Maharaja himself being away on a pilgrimage to Allahabad, had promised to have a boat in readiness to take us across the river to the old fort and palace. Through some misunderstanding we failed to find the boat, but we were just as happy and interested in again rowing up and down the Ghat for 2 hours, seeing a repetition of yesterday's gay scene, till it was time to go to the station for the train to Allahabad. At the junction of Mogulserai we saw an amusing scene. Some Pura ladies on a pilgrimage to Benares were hurried out of their compartments and, with their heads completely covered, hustled across the platform and pushed into a reserved carriage. Here a curtain was hastily hung up over the open grating, which alone divides the third-class carriages. During the afternoon we passed Chunar, celebrated for its quarries of fine yellow durable stone, and Mirzapur, a large cotton manufacturing town. At 5 o'clock we were crossing the Jumna on a magnificent bridge and about to reach Allahabad. Allahabad, or the City of Allah, is a very sacred place, situated as it is on a tongue of land formed by the junction of two such hallowed rivers as the Ganges and the Yamuna. The Hindus say there is a third river which is invisible, flowing direct from heaven and adding its waters unseen to the others. We are fortunate in being here now, as January and February are the great months of pilgrimage, and during that time hundreds of thousands come down to bath. Allahabad is known to the ordinary and non-religious world as the seat of the government of the northwest provinces and Oudh. In the dusk we explored the compound, where polo was just ending, and the wandering length of miles about Canning town. Up and down the broad and dreary roads bordering the burnt-up plains of grass we drove in search of Mr. Lawrence's, the district commissioner's bungalow, which we found, only to be told he was away. Quite familiar we became that evening with the principal feature of Allahabad, the long, straight military and civil lines, with their rows of bungalows. Wednesday, January 21st. A cold, bright morning. After that indispensable meal of the Anglo-Indian chota hazri, or early tea and toast, we drove out to the fort. Such a wonderful spectacle presented itself to us as we emerged out into the open. Across the broad plain flocked thousands of pilgrims in one continuous stream, all going down in the early morning to bathe at the sacred spot where the Ganges and Jumna effect a junction. They formed a bright ribbon of rainbow colours streaming across the flat plain, winding with the turnings of the road. For a mile or more the line extended, and the throng was constantly swelled by stragglers hurrying across the plain to join them. As we drew near, we saw what a motley procession it formed. Crowded ekkas, with the members of an entire family perched up or clinging to its sides, solitary horsemen, children mounted on donkeys, vendors and mountebanks, mingling with the throng of pedestrians, of men, women, and children, all bound on the same errand, all hurrying to the same spot. From the earthen ramparts of the fort we looked down on the curious sight. The delta of sand was covered with a rude encampment, and at the furthermost point where the rivers joined, the banks were invisible from the swarm of human beings. This is where the stream we had followed along the plain became absorbed in the black moving mass. The pilgrim on arrival here sits down on the bank and has his head and body shaved, allowing each hair to fall separately into the water, in sure belief in the promise of the sacred writings, which tells him that for every hair thus deposited 1,000,000 years' residence in heaven is secured. The redstone fort was built by Akbar in 1572, but it presents but a very modern appearance now, filled with the scarlet coats of our regiments and the khaki of the sepoys, whilst the magnificent bullocks of the transport department occupy a corner of the compound. In the center of the fort stands a beautiful monolith, surrounded by a garden. The jagged top shows it has been broken off short, and there are two very ancient Pali inscriptions, barely decipherable on the polished sides. It is one of the 3 Asoka's columns, dating from 235 BC. The second we had seen at Benares, and the other has been recently set up at Delhi. In one corner of the fort we saw a group of natives who were being admitted in parties through a gateway and conducted by a sepoy through a subterranean passage. Down this we went and found ourselves in a crypt underground, quite dark and with walls green and mouldy from the trickling damp. By the light of the sticks laid in a brass pan of oil, we saw some hideous deformities representing gods, smeared with red paint, and many Mahadeos set up among the pillars of this underground temple. As we turned round one of the arches in wandering about, a weird picture appeared to us. Before a burning brazier crouched some figures, illuminated by its fitful light. The flames caught the reflection of the tinsel and gaudy decoration, lighted up the brass-headed god behind, and showed the branching trunk of a tree. This is the old banyan tree, at least 1,500 years old, and which is still worshipped by the natives. We contributed our quota to the little pile of money already spread out before the god. During the mutiny, the Europeans took refuge in the fort, where many of them died of cholera and privations. Allahabad is a favorite military station, though the heat reflected from the surrounding plains is terrific in summer. Once more we explored its dreary length of road, of which we learned there are no less than 79 miles in the city and immediate suburbs. We passed the memorial hall to Lord Mayo, whose tower, with that of the town hall now building, are prominent landmarks in the surrounding flatness, and returned to Laurie's Hotel to breakfast. We left Allahabad at noon, and travelled through the rich valley of the Doab, 100 miles, to Cawnpore. Leaving Cawnpore to visit on our return journey, we changed to the Oud and Rohilkund, a miserable line of railway, and arrived at Lucknow late at night. End of chapter 16.